Hello and welcome to our Kelvin webinar. My name is Valerie Coffey. I am a customer success manager and I am here with a fellow customer success manager, Nikki Sandy, who will be monitoring the chat. So let's go ahead and get started. As we wait to begin, I'd like you to take a few moments and maybe grab a pad of paper. And if you have just recently finished a pulse survey or you're in the middle of giving your pulse survey, I'd like you to take a few minutes and write down your predictions. So what participation percentage are you thinking you're going to hit? What was the overall favorability? And what dimensions and or questions do you think are going to be the highest or lowest in favorability? It really helps as we begin our data analysis to kind of make our own hypothesis of what we're thinking is going to happen. It'll give us a little insight into where we want to head when we start looking at the data. And then the second thing I'd like you to do is just go ahead and log into Kelvin, go to a pulse that you've recently completed and have it open up so that way, as we're going through the information today, you'll have your own data that you can be looking at as well. So I'll give you a moment to do that, and we will get started in just one moment. We are so excited you are participating in our webinar series. Today is day 2. Yesterday, Justin and Jill did a great job with our day 1, looking at reports and doing basic overview, helping you understand what each report provides in the data analysis. And today we're going to follow up on that and build on that learning by talking about digging deeper with our customer reports to help us to know more about our data. And then tomorrow we're going to go into day 3, which is going to be facilitating conversations with our team. So we're going to take what we've learned in day 1 and day 2 and make a plan for how we're going to share that out with our team so that we can dig into the data together and determine what our next step should be. So at this point, you are either finishing up a pulse, gathering that data, or you've just recently completed one. So you've gathered the data, and now it's time to really start understanding what the feedback is on our pulse surveys, whether it's our students or our staff or our parents. Really try to understand the feedback they're trying to tell us. And then the next step, which you'll be kind of working towards tomorrow, is understanding our data so we know what our next steps and action should be. We'll be covering making sure we understand our purpose and goals for today. We'll dive into those reports, and then we'll determine what our next steps are and any questions and answers that we might have. So our goals for today, we want to make sure we understand our purpose, which is we want to know how to dig into and understand our pulse survey data so that we can determine what our next steps are. And we also want to make sure that our goals are that we know how to dig into each of the reports, determine what data we'd like to show and share with others, understand how each report works with other reports and complements them. And then for you to be able to apply that basic understanding of the reports to your own data and be able to dig into that data and start your own data analysis. So some things to consider as we get started. As we are getting ready to review our data and listening to those voices of those who participated in the feedback that they've provided, we want to make sure that we always keep in mind, what was the goal of this pulse in the first place? What are we trying to glean? What area of need should we be focusing on when we're reviewing the data? Is there a specific subgroup we're interested in looking at, or a specific building, if we gave it to in more than one building, a specific grade level? That sometimes helps narrow our focus right away as we are looking at the data. So let's get started on the first report. So when your pulse survey is completed and you click on that survey card, it will take you to the summary report. Now, Justin and Jill did a great job yesterday explaining what you're going to find on each of these reports. And we're not going to go over that today. I've just summarized it quickly in those bullet points of what kind of data you will see. And what we want to look at today is thinking about questions that will help us in digging deeper. So we see the data, but what kind of questions should we be thinking about to help us really dig into our data? So the first one is, what jumps out at us at first glance? We're going to look through the summary report and just kind of notice what's jumping out at us. What is the overall favorability? Did that surprise you? Did it match your prediction? What questions start coming to mind as you're looking at this information? As we look down farther and we're looking at the dimensions, what story is your favorability percentages starting to tell you? It lists it from top, highest favorability to lowest. And so as we scroll down through, what are we noticing? What patterns are we starting to see? Connections maybe between different dimensions of similar favorability. And I'm noticing that as I scroll to the bottom, I'm very pleased by some of the ones I'm seeing at the top that, are areas we've worked on, and I've seen some positive favorability come out of that. But I'm also noticing that as I scroll to the bottom, that the favorability of safety and connection is my lowest. And that really gets me wondering, like, what is it that is causing students to maybe feel less safe and connected? So I think it's a great idea if you have a pad of paper with you as you start your data analysis. You might have already written down your predictions of what you thought you might see. So now you can start writing questions that are going to be things that you're going to want to dig deeper on as you go into some of these other reports. And so thinking about safety and connection, and my next one just above that is relationships. I'm going to see what else I can find out about those two as I drill into my heat map report. So I'm going to scroll back up to the Skittle menu, and I'm going to click on heat map. And I'm going to look at my heat map to see what I can discover about those dimensions. So as I'm looking at it, the first initial glance of your heat map will show you all of your subgroups. And what is standing out to me as I'm looking through it is that I am struggling with specific grade levels. So I'm grouping it by grade levels, and that's what my top heat map image up here is showing. And I'm looking at it by grade level. I decided that the overall subgroup didn't quite give me what I wanted. So I'm drilling in a little bit more to see if I can see anything as I'm looking by the actual grade level. And what I noticed right away is all the orange and the blue. And that is what the heat map is designed to do. It's supposed to really narrow your focus by color. And so the darker blue and the orange really kind of pop. And I'm seeing that as I'm looking at this, my 6th grade is mostly orange, a little bit of yellow, and only one area of blue. So that really catches my attention, where I look at the 12th graders and they're almost completely dark blue. So that gets me wondering, okay, so what is it about the 6th grade? And then I noticed next to that is 9th grade, and 9th grade has a little bit of orange, some gray area, and then a little bit of blue. So they're my next level. That is like, it's really standing out to me that these 2 grade levels are the ones maybe that I should be looking at a little deeper. So I'm looking at 6th grade, and I notice for 6th and 9th grade, and even 7th grade a little bit, safety and connection are areas of concern. Well, that really resonates because when I was looking at the summary report, safety and connection was the lowest overall rating. And relationships is the next one down. Relationships for 6th graders is also in orange. It's also lower than anything else for the 9th graders. And so I'm starting to see that maybe this is an area of concern for these 2 grade levels. I can also go up to view it by question if I want to dig a little deeper. And that's what my bottom image is looking at the same information, the same subgroups of grade level, and now looking at it by the different questions. And I noticed that once again, sixth grade and ninth grade are the lowest. So I'm going to click and look at the questions that we can be going through. What jumps out at you at first glance? We've kind of talked through that. We've talked through the favorability scores in orange. We've noticed what's happening in dark blue. Didn't even need these questions. It just kind of jumped out at me before I even thought about what questions I should be looking at. That's what I love about the heat map, is just looking at it just draws your eyes to things and gets you thinking and asking questions. Make sure you're writing those questions down so that you can keep digging in and asking more and more. It's going to narrow your focus, and it's going to help you determine where your focus should be as you start to take action. The last question is, as I get to my questions report, where might I want to keep digging deeper? So some heat map tips and tricks for you. As we look at the heat map, what subgroup jumps out to you first? What do you notice about that group? If we change the group by to that subgroup, what do you notice? What dimensions are more favorable? What are least favorable? And you'll notice as you change the subgroups that the colors on the heat map intensify because we're dealing with a smaller subset of your total population. It gets more intense in color, which is great. It gives us more information. And then we also talked about how we can change it from viewing the dimension to viewing the questions. That can provide additional information to help you with that subgroup. And then what questions have the highest and lowest favorability? So another question that I want to throw out to you is, what happens if we would apply another filter to this subgroup? What additional insight might that provide for us? You may or may not have noticed that in the upper right-hand corner of each of the reports, there is a filter button, which is outlined in green. And you can click on that filter button on any of your reports and filter by school, grade, race, ethnicity, gender, program, class, or you're even able to create custom groups if you have the permissions to really narrow in your focus more. What's great about this is the filters are sticky. So once you've applied it to a report, it will stay applied as you move from report to report. You don't have to reset it as you go through. Something to note though, is that sometimes you're working and looking at data and you jump over to another report and your mind is shifted to a different question and the data doesn't look right to you. Always look up in the top right corner. If that filter is filled in with green rather than that outline of green, it means you have a filter applied, and that might be making your data look different than you expect. So you can just go on any of the reports, click that filter button and clear the filter. Because it is sticky, sometimes we forgot that we left it on. So questions that you might use for this one is, how might using filters allow you to dig deeper and learn more about your pulse survey results? It's fun to play around with it. It's interesting to see what happens to your data as you apply different filters and the insights that that can provide for you. So I encourage you to just start thinking about it. As we zoom in on the example that I'm using here, I can show you how this works. I grouped my heat map report by grade level. So I had all the grade levels that were given the pulse, and then I also looked at it by question. So that's what my image is here. Because I've already noticed it's primarily sixth and ninth grade that I want to spend time looking at, I can go and filter to just sixth and ninth grade and apply that filter. And so you can see here, I only have sixth and ninth grade. The colors are very intense now. And this is giving me even more information because I'm only looking at these two subgroups and not looking at all of them. I can really see that sixth grade and ninth grade are struggling with being nervous or anxious because they're not feeling very safe at school. They don't feel like they have a lot of voice to help decide things. Ninth graders especially are saying that they don't feel like students respect each other. And students are feeling in sixth grade, especially, both groups are feeling this, that discipline isn't always fair, and that the sixth graders are also feeling like, are they students trying to work out their disagreements by talking to each other? And they're not feeling very favorable that that is working well. And they're also not really sure that they feel like they belong. That's also factoring into this. And as you keep looking down, there might be other ones that jump out at you. But these, as we're looking at the most predominant ones, I'm starting to see a story here. And I'm also noticing that it was sixth and ninth grade. So I'm going to start thinking about, why is it just those two grades that are feeling this way predominantly? One thing I notice is, well, sixth grade is the beginning of the middle school grade levels. So they're newest to that building. The same is also true for the ninth graders. So is that part of what's factoring into this, is that they're the newest into the building, and they are maybe just feeling more unsure of their place. Maybe they're still learning the ways of a new building. And, and sometimes our buildings are coming together from several elementaries or several middle schools. Maybe they're having to get to know other students, and the culture has shifted a little bit. And so they're learning how to respect each other in this new group that they're in. We can see where maybe that's causing some nervousness and anxiety. Now, at this moment, I'm just kind of hypothesizing a little bit to see, as I'm continuing to look at the data, if that is proving true, if I need to think about this a little bit more. But these are questions that you might want to start thinking about, that as you take it back to your team, you might want to have discussions about as a group. And then the other thing I just want to plant as an idea is that you might want to take just sixth and ninth grade and come up with some additional pulse questions that you could send out to just those two groups to see if you could gather some additional information. Now, on the survey that I just did, we did not ask for comments, so I don't have comments to help me understand their thinking, but maybe on a follow-up pulse, you could ask some comments or open it up for comments so that you could actually really get some information from them as to what drove their thinking on some of these questions. So that's how I would zoom in as I'm using the heat map, looking at grouping by different subgroups, looking at how I am going to look at dimensions and questions, and then how I'm going to apply a filter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the questions report. And remember, we've applied that filter. So if I want to go back and look at it overall, I need to turn that filter off first. But some questions to help me. Once again, what is jumping out at me? Are there any question results that surprised you as you're looking through them, for good or for cause for concern? And how do the actual question results allow you to dig deeper into that overall dimension and question favorability percentage? And what could I learn at this level of granularity? So as each of these questions, it gives me that overall favorability, but I can drill into each one of them. And you can see over on the right, I can see what Likert scale option they actually chose. And that gives me a little bit more insight. So I have it on the left as the overall group scores or favorability. But if I look over here on the filtered one, this is just my sixth and ninth graders again. So I can look at it and compare how their question favorability compared to the overall. And then I can also, as I drill into each question, I can look at it once by overall. I might even want to take a screenshot of that so I have it. And then I can look at it like I have in the bottom filtered. And what I'm noticing here in my example is that my favorability actually flip-flopped. Overall, students were much less nervous or anxious than when I filtered to just sixth through ninth grade, where that was more of the predominant answer. It's very interesting to apply these filters to really dig in and look at it at this level of granularity. And as you can see, filters do make a difference. So I really encourage you, as you're digging in, to start going through this process and filter by whatever you're noticing in your data, filter that on some of these other reports and see what it tells you when you compare it to the overall. Okay, another report that you may have permission to see is the participant report. And this one is a permission-based report. So if you aren't seeing it in your Skittles menu, talk to your system administrator for Kelvin to see if that's possible. They may have a reason why they aren't sharing it out. But what this report shows you is how students are interacting with the Pulse survey and what their overall favorability is. As we go through and we want to dig deeper, once again, what jumps out at you? As I'm looking at the image here I have on my screen, I see 3 students with 0 favorability. That jumps out to me right away. As I scroll down, the favorability increases to the highest favorability. So it goes from lowest to highest. And I noticed that as well. But I'm really interested in these students that had 0. If I sort from overall to by dimension, does anything jump out? We were looking at relationships and we were looking at safety and connection. So I might want to switch it to that one and look at what happens when I look at it from that lens. What do I notice then? And what do I notice if I apply a filter? If I apply by the filter of 6th and 9th graders again, what do I notice? And so I have this one set to the filter. Overall, I wanted to kind of see their whole picture first, and I have the filter set to just 6th and 9th graders. What I noticed is my 3 students with 0 favorability. And I wanted to point that out to you because this gives you a couple different pieces of information. So if I look at Darren compared to Jared and to Jarrett, you'll notice that Darren took about 3 minutes, answered 21 questions. Didn't answer every single question, but answered most of them. The questions Darren answered were all marked with an unfavorable response. And so Darren's responses concerned me because the responses he gave were unfavorable. I might want to dig into that a little bit more to see what is going on. But Jared's a little different. He answered 0 questions. He went through the survey and just skipped through every question. And he only took 18 seconds to do that. So he wasn't really engaged, just kind of went through each and hit submit. If they hit submit, it's considered participating, even if they didn't answer any questions. But maybe it wasn't that Jarrett was not engaged. Maybe Jarrett wasn't really understanding how to interact with the Pulse survey. And so maybe this is a teaching moment. Maybe Jarrett didn't know that after he went through and looked at each of the questions and skipped them, he could go back up and click on each question and actually answer it or change an answer that he already gave. We might want to look, if we have a high number of students that didn't answer any questions, maybe we want to show them or do a practice pulse with them so they can practice interacting with it and then give them a pulse where we really want their feedback. That might be an option. Ernie is another one, answered only 7 questions, but once again, every question that was answered was with an unfavorable response. So overall response was unfavorable. So what we could do with these students, now that we know that they either have 0 favorability or they have low favorability, we could go by dimension and look at that and see if it holds up for these same students if we switched it to safety and connection. And what we could do is, okay, these students are struggling in this area. Maybe we need a follow-up pulse where we just make a custom group of these students and we share out a pulse with them and ask a few more questions. Allow comments. That might give us more insight into what's going on. We can also turn on the request to speak to an adult. And if all of their responses are unfavorable or the majority are unfavorable, they'll get that last option to ask to speak to an adult. which may be a safe way for them to connect with you. And if you notice on this survey that I've got here, we did not ask for comments and we did not ask for the ability to speak to an adult. So those are 0 there. But if we did, then we could also see on this report who left comments and who also asked to speak to an adult. So that can give you more information to help drive your decision about, do we need to have an intervention? Do we need some instruction, maybe for a whole group of students? Maybe our whole 6th grade need some instruction to help them with feeling more of a connection to the group and to this new building that they're a part of. Hopefully this really will help drive and make clear to you, like, oh, this is something we could try. And that way we can have discussions as our team about what we want to do next. So some key takeaways for you. Begin with the end in mind. As you are developing a pulse, what's our purpose, our why for this pulse? What are we needing to hear or learn about? Are there specific subgroups that we are focusing on, or just the data in general? Is there a specific dimension that we're drilling into, or a specific question? And now we're going to follow up with that if we get certain information. How are filters allowing us to look at the data on a more granular level? And how are we narrowing down the data so that we can work with our team on what is important, so that we can really use that time that we have. We know time's very limited and valuable. We want it to be focused and useful and provide you some key takeaways from your data analysis so that you know exactly what you want to do next. So we want to make sure that you have the tools and for you to do that. So that's going to allow you to get ready for tomorrow, which is day 3 of our survey, which is facilitating those conversations with your reports and your team. And so as you're getting ready for tomorrow's conversation, take what you've learned today, review one of your pulses, think about what you would like to discuss with your team, what you've already noticed, where your hypotheses are. You can start thinking about how you want to drive that conversation so that you can get the best use of your time. Determine specific reports, specific filters that you would like to use so that you can jump right to those things as you're walking through the data. And you might even want to go ahead and take screenshots of those specific reports so that you can make sure that you have it all ready. And then when you go into tomorrow's webinar, you will have that already at your fingertips. And Nikki's going to be helping you with getting your materials ready for that conversation with your team. So you'll have everything you need ready at your fingertips. We hope that you have found this time together today helpful. I know one of the questions that just has come in is, how do we do screenshots? Is there a way to download the data? We don't have a download button directly, but we know a lot of people use the extension of either Go Full Page, or there's another one called Screenly that I've used. It's SCRNLI. And that's a great way to get either a full window or just a partial window screenshot very, very quickly and easily, and it's pretty clean. And both of those, I think, come with specific tools to like blur out things if you need to blur out certain information, or markup tools. So feel free to go ahead and use those and get your information ready to go. And that's it for today. We're so glad that you were here today. We hope you found it helpful. If you ever have any questions, we are here to help. Feel free to reach out to hello@kelvin.education. One of us will be happy to answer your questions and provide you the support that you need. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.